This is Kate at the Library of Whispers, and today I'm going to do a little bit of reading from this biography of Oscar Wilde. It's quite a famous biography by Richard Ellman. It's a very thick book. I've had this book for a while. I thought we could start with Wilde's early years. So I put my bookmark in the right place. So this is chapter 1, Toil of Growing Up. Let's begin. First words. Oscar Wilde first emerges for us into articulate being in 1868, when he was 13, in a letter he wrote to his mother from school. Badora Royal School in Enniskillen, which prepared pupils for Trinity College Dublin, was a good school, though to call it the Eton of Ireland, as the headmaster and Wilde's mother did, was pretentious. In later life, Wilde told D.J. O'Donoghue, the tireless compiler of an Irish biographical dictionary, that he had spent about a year there. The actual period was 7 years, from age 9 to 16. Facts were pending. Interviewed for the Biograph, an English annual which published his life in 6 pages when he was only 26. Wilde said that he had been privately tutored at home. Badora was not a resonant name, and it seemed preferable to have attended no school rather than one that had to be laboriously identified. I have forgotten my school days, says Mrs. Cheveley in An Ideal Husband. I have a vague impression that they were detestable. Then, too, Wilde found it imaginatively seductive to deconstruct his nurture, to obliterate by whim all those sums and paradigms. No school on earth produced Oscar Wilde's, but Badora, which flourishes still, must be credited with having prepared not only Wilde, but Samuel Beckett. The letter Wilde wrote from there unfortunately survives only in a fragment. Still, as a hieroglyph of his adolescence, it is valuable. September 1868. Badora School. Darling Mamma, the hamper came today, and I never got such a jolly surprise. Many thanks for it. It was more than kind of you to think of it. Don't please forget to send me the National Review. The flannel shirts you sent in the hamper are both Willie's. Mine are one quite scarlet and the other lilac, but it is too hot to wear them yet. You never told me anything about the publisher in Glasgow. What does he say? And have you written to Aunt Warren on the green note paper? The rest of the letter is said to have referred to a cricket win over a regimental side, and to that horrid regatta. Accompanying the letter was a sketch, now lost, captioned, Ye delight of ye boys at ye hamper, and ye sorrow of ye hamperless boy. The person we think of as Oscar Wilde is assembling here. He is on excellent terms with his darling mother, and keen to be on better ones, perhaps because his elder brother Willie is distinctly a rival for her attention. Oscar will unseat him later. With a precocious sense of the ridiculous, he pictures the scene of felicity and misery which the delivery of the hamper had created. His appetite for dramatic presentation is whetted. Other He also enjoyed his mother's practical jokes, and Warren in the letter was Lady Wilde's much older sister, Emily Thomasine, who in 1829 had married Samuel Warren, then a captain, and later, like his brother Nathaniel, a lieutenant colonel in the British Army. Mrs. Warren, her unionist politics befitting an army wife, frowned on her sister, who as a nationalist frowned back. Irking and Warren, with green notepaper, was a shared subversive delight. Emily Warren, except as co-owner with the Wildes of certain properties, does not appear on the scene again. Her husband had died about 1850, and she herself in 1881. Like her older brother, who became a judge in Louisiana, she kept her distance from Sister Jane. Yet perhaps a bit of Emily Thomasine Warren survives in Aunt Augusta Bracknell, whose husband's brother is a general with a first name, Ernest, more solemn than Samuel and Nathaniel. Lady Bracknell issues English commands which are promptly disobeyed by Irish hearts. Jane, Speranza, Francesca Wilde. All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That's his. The mother to whom this boy of 13 addressed himself was no ordinary person. Lady Wilde had a sense of being destined for greatness, and imparted it. Her son subscribed to her view, and treated her with the utmost consideration and respect, almost as though he were her precursor rather than she is. 4 years before she received that letter from school, her husband had been knighted. The title helped because she had always been uneasy about her first name, which was Jane, and had modified her second name, almost certainly Frances, into Francesca, regarding the new name as a brilliant vestige of the LG family's origins in Italy, where, according to what she maintained, was a family tradition. They had been called Alchiata, from Alchiata to Alchiera, was an easy backward leap, and Dante could not save himself from becoming Jane L.G.'s ancestor. Her son in turn was to claim a visual resemblance to and a spiritual kinship with both Shakespeare and Nero. What signature to use became a complicated matter. To tradesmen or correspondents of no consequence, she signed herself Jane Wilde. To those she liked, she was Francesca, or J. Francesca Wilde. But she had another forename as well, altogether of her own devising. This was Speranza. It was part of the motto with which a notepaper was embossed: Fidanza, Speranza, Costanza. In her correspondence with Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, translator of Dante, she signed herself Francesca Speranza Wilde. That she found a certain humour in her nom de plume is evident from a cheering letter she sent to the Irish novelist William Colton. In truth, I cannot bear this despondency of yours. Unrecognised genius may name its miseries, deep and poignant, but not yours. Let Saint Speranza, if you will, allow my canonisation, work the miracle of your restoration, for your gloom is all imaginary. Colton responded by praising the great ocean of her soul. The rivering waters that formed the great ocean have been traced among her ancestors as his own name. Lady Wilde's maternal great-grandfather, Dr. Kingsbury, was a well-known physician and friend of Jonathan Swift. Her father, Charles Elgee, 1783 to 1821, took up the law, and his father, John Elgee, 1753 to 1823, was a rector and archdeacon in the Church of Ireland. Her mother, Sarah, was the daughter of another cleric, Thomas Kingsbury, who besides being vicar of Kildare, held the secular post of Commissioner of Bankruptcy. Further back, Lady Wilde's paternal great-grandfather, Charles Elgee, 1709 to 87, was a well-off farmer in County Down. Another ancestor on her mother's side was English, a bricklayer, died 1805, who emigrated from County Durham in the 1770s because of the Irish building boom. Given these unexceptionable antecedents, Lady Wilde still opted for her hypothetical Tuscan origins. Like her son, she enjoyed improving upon reality. She allowed it to be understood that she had been born in 1826. When pressed, she responded airily that her birth had never been recorded, no registry office having been required when giants still walk the earth. The parish register that might have refuted her has not been found. Indeed, says Lady Bracknell, no woman should ever be quite accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. The biographers have sought for the date of Lady Wilde's birth in vain. It is possible, now gracelessly to reveal on the basis of her application for a grant from the Royal Literary Fund in November 1888, by which time age rather than youth was to her advantage, that she was born on the 27th of December 1821, a mere half-decade earlier than she had said. Her son Oscar was a match for her. He regularly claimed to be 2 years younger than he was, even on his marriage certificate. And Lady Wilde went along with this chronology, congratulating him on winning the Newdigate at the age of only 22, when she knew he was close to 24. Lady Wilde communicated to her son both her nationalism and her determination to embody it in verse. One version she gave of how she made her debut on the national stage Protestants as well as Catholics that they must take up the nationalist cause. Jane L.G. began to write verse on the coming revolution, on the famine, and on the exodus from Ireland of the famished. These she submitted to Charles Gavin Duffy, editor of The Nation, which had been founded in 1842 under the name of Speranza. They were enclosed in letters signed John Fanshawe Ellis, in echo of Jane Francesca L.G. When Gavin Duffy liked and printed her patriotic poems, she submitted some love poetry which he liked less and did not print. Still, his curiosity was awakened, and he asked Ellis to come and see him. Ellis responded by asking Gavin Duffy to pay a visit instead to 34 Leeson Street. There, as Gavin Duffy recounts, the smiling maid, on being asked for Mr. Ellis, showed him into a drawing room, where he found only George Smith, publisher to the university. "What, my loyal friend, are you the new volcano of sedition?" asked Gavin Duffy. Smith left the room and returned with a tall girl on his arm, whose stately carriage and figure, flashing brown eyes and features, cast in a heroic mould, seemed fit for the genius of poetry or the spirit of revolution. The stage managing was characteristic, as Jane L.G. confided later to the mathematician Sir William Hamilton. She loved to make a sensation. Gavin Duffy wrote to her that one day she would win a reputation not second to Mrs. Browning. Speranza's verses were inflammatory. The young patriot leader was on Thomas Francis Meagher, convicted of treason in 1849 in a trial she attended. The government, however, took more notice of the prose in The Nation. Gavin Duffy, as editor and lead writer, was put in prison to await trial for sedition. In his absence, Jane L.G. wrote editorials for 2 successive issues of the paper, which said outright what Gavin Duffy had put circumspectly. In The Hour of Destiny, on the 22nd of July 1848, she announced that the long-pending war with England has actually commenced, and a week later, in Jacta Alia Est, the dies cast, fiercely exclaimed, "Oh, for 100,000 muskets glimmering brightly in the light of heaven." But she was willing to allow, if England capitulated promptly, the golden link of the monarchy to continue to unite the 2 nations. These articles inflamed the government, if not the populace, and were tacked on to the charges against Gavin Duffy as being his work, even though he was in prison. When the barrister pleading his case, Isaac Butt, said he could defend everything except the Jacta Alia Est, Jane L.G. went to the Solicitor General, denounced herself as author of the articles, and asked to have the added charge removed from Gavin Duffy's indictment. She was refused. "I think this piece of heroism will make a good scene when I write my life," she boasted to a Scottish friend. When the prosecutor interrogated Gavin Duffy about the articles, a tall woman arose in the gallery to interrupt. "I, and I alone, am the culprit, if culprit there be." The judge gavelled her down, but the prosecution dropped this line of questioning. Gavin Duffy was tried 4 times. Jury after jury being unwilling to convict, he was at last set free. Jane L.G.'s intervention was the most effective act in the 3 great courtroom dramas in which the Wilde family performed. It must have been in her mind 47 years later, when she insisted that her son Oscar stand trial rather than run away, anticipating that he too might have a famous satiated with empires, though a Saint Helena were the end. All virtue must be active, she declared at another time. There is no such thing as negative virtue. If heroic deeds were not possible, she could at least dress with daring do. At the Lord Lieutenant's Ball on St. Patrick's Day 1859, she vaunted a dress that was 3 skirts of white silk, ruched round with white ribbon and hooped up with bouquets of gold flowers and green shamrocks. In her salon in Dublin and later in London, she got a figure in increasingly outlandish costumes, surmounted by headdresses and festooned with outsize and bizarre jewellery. Her remarks were in keeping with her attire. Oscar Wilde would comment later, "Where there is no extravagance, there is no love, and where there is no love, there is no understanding." In its lower range, Lady Wilde's conscious rhetoric could be quite forthright, as when she wrote in an essay on the bondage of women, "We have now traced the history of women from paradise to the 19th century, and have heard nothing through the long roll of their ages but the clank of their fetters." Her son would turn this round in A Woman of No Importance. The history of women is the history of the worst form of tyranny the world has ever known. The tyranny of the weak over the strong. It is the only tyranny that lasts. His mother did not see history in this way. She interrupted the feminist Mona Card to say, "Every woman will give the top of the jug to some man till the end of the chapter." In conversation she was iconoclastic. When someone asked her to receive a young woman who was respectable, she replied, "You must never employ that description in this house. It is only tradespeople who are respectable. We are above respectability." In The Importance of Being Earnest, when Lady Bracknell asks, "Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?" Canon Chasuble replies, "She is the most cultivated of ladies, and the very picture of respectability." "It's obviously the same person," said Lady Bracknell. Wilde once announced that his mother and he had decided to found a society for the suppression of virtue, and it says something for their kinship of minds that either of them might have originated the idea. What Lady Wilde contributed to the Irish scene was a talent for magnifying parochial matters. For her poetry meant oratory. Coulson Kernahan reports her rebuke to a friend of his: "You and other poets are content to express only your little soul in poetry. I express the soul of a great nation. Nothing less would content me, who am the acknowledged voice in poetry of all the people of Ireland." When she moved to England after her husband's death, she complained with pomp and dejection, "I have a habit of looking at souls, not forms. Alas, now I only feel the agony and loss of all that made life endurable, and my singing robes are trailed in London clay." She claimed Services Hospital, Dublin, which he founded in 1844, was the first in Ireland to treat afflictions of these organs. His books, Oral Surgery, 1853, and Epidemic Ophthalmia, 1851, were the earliest textbooks in their fields and stood up well for years. Even today, surgeons use the term Wilde's incision for mastoid, Wilde's cone of light, and Wilde's cords. He displayed great skill in amassing medical data for books about Austria and the Mediterranean coast. When a census of Ireland was undertaken in 1851, Wilde was appointed Census Commissioner to organise the collection of medical information. His statistics on the incident of deafness and blindness and eye and ear diseases were the first ever compiled in Ireland. He was appointed a surgeon oculist to the Queen in Ireland in 1863, and the next year was knighted. However demanding his medical work was, he pursued other interests. He wrote easily and on many subjects. The Skull of Swift came into his hands, and he published a short, valuable book to prove that the great satirist in his last years was not insane, but physically ill. William Wilde trained his own eye on Irish archaeological remains and his ear on folklore. He was the first to find and identify a lake dwelling. He brilliantly and speedily catalogued the great collection of antiquities now in the National Museum of Ireland. From his peasant patients, often in lieu of fees, he collected superstitions, legends, cures and charms that might have been lost. An attendant wrote them down at the time, and Wilde's widow would edit and publish them in 2 posthumous volumes that had a great influence on Yeats. The catalogue of antiquities is still in use, and William Wilde's little book of Irish popular superstitions, 1852, dedicated to Speranza, can still engage and amuse. Like his wife, William Wilde was a nationalist. Discouraged by the failure of the 1848 uprising, both disassociated themselves from the Republican Fenianism of the late 1860s. Speranza expressly disavowed democracy. William Wilde's nationalism expressed itself in a love for the countryside, past and present. 2 of his books deal with Lough Corrib and Lough Mask in the West, 1867, and with the Boyne and Blackwater in the east of Ireland, 1849. He not only knew the places thoroughly, he could also recreate their history. The legendary Battle of Moytora, for example, in which the Tuatha De Danann defeated the Fomorians near Cong, was so much in his mind that he claimed to have found the grave of one of its heroes, and in 1864 built Moytora House on the supposed site of the battle. When the British Association visited the Aran Islands in 1857, William Wilde was their official guide, and so impressed the governor of Uppsala, who was among the visiting dignitaries, that he invited the Wildes to Sweden. In 1862, he conferred on Wilde the Order of the Polar Star. Success promotes malice. Yeats discounts, but cannot keep from relating, a horrible folk story that Sir William once took out the eyes of a man who had come to consult him as an ophthalmologist, and laid them upon a plate, intending to replace them, and that the eyes were eaten by a cat. Cats love eyes, said a friend of Yeats. More to the point, tongues in Dublin wagged Saturday afternoons for over 100. Writers, university professors, government officials and visiting actors and musicians thronged these parties. Under Lady Wilde's aegis, musicians played, actors and actresses enacted scenes, and poets recited their verses. The energy with which Sir William faced the world was not necessarily maintained in private. Between his bursts of activity he was often despondent. His wife reported that she had asked him, "What could make you happy?" only to receive the answer, "Death." Though he was acquisitive of honour, he could be humble. In his book on the Boyne, he begins by saying that he is not strictly speaking an archaeologist, having much other work to do, and he defers to the authority of Petrie and others. One aspect of Sir William Wilde was known only to his intimates. Before his marriage he had fathered 3 illegitimate children. He was 23 when his first child, a boy named Henry Wilson, the surname slyly implying Wild Son, was born in Dublin in 1838, and since Wilde had been away from Ireland for more than 9 months, the child was evidently conceived abroad. Sir William looked after his son, educated him, and took him into his surgery as a fellow practitioner. The mother or mothers of the other 2 children, Emily, born in 1847, and Mary, born in 1849, are also unknown. The Reverend Ralph Wilde, Sir William's eldest brother, adopted the 2 girls as his wards, so they kept the name of Wilde. In the Dublin of this time, the old Regency permissiveness lingered. Sir William's friend Isaac Butt, before Parnell, the leader of the Irish party in Parliament, also had illegitimate children, and apparently no one minded. Perhaps Oscar Wilde derived his interest in foundlings, orphans, and mysteries of birth from his experience of his father's extended family, when they all summered together, legitimate and illegitimate children alike, in Glen Macnas, south of Dublin. Sir Dorian Gray is in love with a young woman of illegitimate birth, whose brother reproaches their mother for her fall. Lady Windermere has been abandoned by her errant mother, and a cloud hangs over Jack Worthing's birth in the importance of being earnest. Young Arbuthnot's mother, in A Woman of No Importance, is unmarried. More largely, discovering who they really are is the pursuit of most of Wilde's principal characters. Henry Wilson outlived his father, but Emily and Mary were not so fortunate. In the course of showing off their ball dresses before a party, one went too close to an open fire, caught her crinoline in the flames, and was terribly burned. So was her sister, who tried frantically to rescue her. Their gravestone records them as dying, both on the same day, on the 10th of November, 1871. Sir William's grief was intense, and his groans could be heard outside the house. A simple stone in the garden of Moytora House, bearing the inscription "In Memoriam," may commemorate the death of the 2 girls as well as that as from October 1862, yet she had remained patient. That same year she had accepted from Wilde the fare to Australia and failed to embark. Her case was not strong. An allegation of, after so long an interval, would have had no chance of a favourable verdict. Instead, Mary Travers wrote letters containing dark hints to newspapers and composed a scurrilous pamphlet about the Wildes as Dr. and Mrs. Quilp, which she cheekily signed Speranza. Lady Wilde was so stung she protested by letter to Mary Travers' father, lately become Professor of Medical Jurisprudence at Trinity College, that his daughter was making unfounded allegations. When Mary Travers discovered this letter of the 6th of May 1864 among her father's papers, she sued Lady Wilde for libel. The case was heard over 5 days, from the 12th to the 17th of December 1864. Everyone wondered whether Sir William would take the stand, but since it was not he who was being sued, he did not have to. His failure to do so was of course a point for Mary Travers, the barrister for Miss Travers.